In the first video, we spoke about the importance of selecting big ideas in your subject, sequencing these to tell a compelling narrative, and then being very specific. Generally speaking, teachers start curriculum development by looking and making schemes of work. Schemes of work are great for identifying the order of delivery, but they don't tell you the specific details of what exactly it is you want every student in your class to learn. Being specific in this way is really valuable, and that's what we're going to discuss in this video. One of the best ways to set out exactly what the specifics of your curriculum are going to be is the knowledge bank. A knowledge bank is like a termly self-assessment. You take it and you write down the most vital, useful and powerful knowledge that you want your classes to know on one single A4 page. And you tell yourself, right, I have laid down a gauntlet. Every child in my class will know what is on this page by the end of this term. In this sense, the scheme of work provides the bare bones of your course, the textbook, the rich examples, and your knowledge bank, the specific details of what exactly it is you expect them to know by the end of the course. Knowledge banks are going to cut your workload. Now that might sound a little far-fetched given how long they take to make and also how much thought has to go into them, but once they're in place, you have a ready-made self-assessment, retrieval practice, homework setting machine. Knowledge banks aren't just great for teachers, they're also really helpful for students as well. Human working memory is really vulnerable to overload. We can't cope with much new information at any one time. If we can get students to memorize key definitions and key quotations from a knowledge bank, in the lesson they can spend time comparing this information and evaluating it. However, if we go straight to the evaluation and the comparison, there's very little chance that the student's working memory won't be overloaded. Therefore, if we want students to really push on and learn, these knowledge banks provide a great foundation. Knowledge banks also allow students to develop the attitudes that contribute to success. Expecting students to complete homework using the knowledge bank, as well as do their own retrieval practice on areas they're unsure of, encourages them to engage in the sort of study behaviours that's going to help them long term. By making a habit out of these behaviours, we're more likely to develop people that actually engage in lifelong learning. For me, the biggest advantage of all is yet to be said. It's not actually the knowledge organisers and their use in the classroom, but the production of them. Making a knowledge organiser forces you to consider every single detail of your course and judge it in terms of how significant it is to the bigger picture of what you're trying to achieve. By going through my curriculum with a fine-tooth comb, and identifying the difference between essential and non-essential content, I'm able to see a much clearer route to being an expert in my subject and share this in the way that I deliver content. During lessons, I find myself emphasizing the connection between ideas that I previously hadn't even thought of. The act of making the organizers has made me more informed about the curriculum I deliver and able to deliver it to a much higher standard. I also think knowledge banks have the power to transform curriculum meetings. Rather than a focus on data or on why I haven't done my reports on time again, the discussion can be about what is and isn't included within the banks. Debating and hearing a wide range of opinions will help bring together departments around a common set of beliefs about what their subject is and why it matters. It's also an opportunity to learn from colleagues. When discussing issues such as what is and isn't included, I've come across a wide range of examples and ideas that I had not considered before. It also helped me to see connections that my colleagues make and understand how I can integrate these into my classroom practice. There are 3 tips I wish I'd been given before I started creating my knowledge banks. It would have been a much quicker and easier process had I known these things. The first is to always keep your eye on the finish line. How does the knowledge you're including in your knowledge bank help students to develop as experts in your subject long term? If you can't see how it fits with the narrative of your curriculum, then maybe it's not worth including. The second tip is to think very carefully about how you organise material. To start with, I listed a large number of definitions, but categorising or grouping these in some way makes it much easier for students to understand how they fit with the overall ideas of your subject. As well as organising within a topic, it's very important to try and organise across topics. Some of the best knowledge banks that I've come across use symbols, images, or even colour to mark themes or issues between different topics within their curriculum. So for example, they might use a Houses of Parliament to symbolise every time power is referred to in the course. Bringing students' attention to these big themes make them much more likely to understand how the information fits within the bigger picture of your subject. My third and final tip would be to look at as many other people's knowledge banks as you can before you start making your own. Loads can be found on the TES, and I've included in the description below a range that I feel are useful. Looking at other people's can really help you to clarify and understand what knowledge banks are for. A lot of people spend a lot of time organising their content in really creative ways, and learning from and borrowing from that can be really valuable. However, the cunning amongst you might think of using other people's as your own. I would advocate against this strongly. As I said earlier, the most important part of a knowledge organiser is making it. By producing a knowledge bank, you develop an analytical framework for judging content and deciding if it is important enough to include in your course. I don't think using somebody else's resource would ever achieve this goal. If you want your knowledge banks to have the most impact they possibly can, you have to think creatively about how it fits with the broader landscape of your classroom practice. In my subject, I've found knowledge banks to be perfect when married with retrieval practice. This is really simple in my classroom. All I do is give out a blank piece of paper to students and ask them to remember as much as they can about a particular topic area. If students are finding this too difficult, I'll go round and show them the headings from the knowledge bank. If they're finding it too easy, I'll simply go to their table and ask them to categorise the information in a different way, for example in terms of significance. The beauty of this is that students can check their answers against the knowledge bank, and then cover it back up and have another go. Another way you can conduct retrieval practice using the knowledge bank is to place a knowledge bank into the middle of an A3 sheet and ask students to identify connections to previously taught content. Knowledge banks also have huge potential to improve the quality of peer and self-assessment. After a test, students could be asked to check their definitions against those in the knowledge bank. Knowledge banks also work really well for paired work. One student has access to the knowledge bank and quizzes their partner. How we integrate knowledge banks into our daily practice will define how useful they are to our students. The more carefully you consider and embed them within your practice, the more likely they are to have an impact. If you think carefully about what you include in your knowledge banks as stepping stones for students to become expert in your subject, and ensure that every student every term knows everything that's written on that A4 piece of paper, then you're putting your students in a really strong place to develop the cultural capital they will need to be successful.